This is an update on Hurricane Milton, just hours away at the taping of this video from landfall in Florida, and it's really zeroing in right on the Sarasota, Bradenton, parts of the Tampa area on that west coast. Tim Buckley with you. We've been following this throughout the week, even as we're here in North Carolina, our friends and neighbors in Florida going through a tough time with this storm, to be sure. The days are really turning into hours now as we watch it get a little bit closer to the shoreline. You can see on the wide view the scope of this system, which actually, compared to some other hurricanes, it is a little bit smaller in size. Helene was a lot bigger. This one is more intense, but tighter in that storm center. You can see right here, earlier in the day, it was still a very strong Category 4, even close to a Category 5 at times. There has been some weakening, which was expected as the storm got closer to the shoreline. A couple of things have been happening. Some dry air wrapping into the storm, which is why you don't see much rain on the south side of the system right now. Not only that, but there's also been what we would call wind shear. All you need to know about that is if there's harsh winds in the atmosphere kind of tugging or pulling at the storm, well, it can cause it to weaken, or at the very least, stop it from strengthening. And that sure has happened. In fact, we're lucky that this is weakened down to a 3 now with 120-mile-per-hour winds. Having said that, this is still going to have some really devastating impacts to central Florida, right there on the west coast. It's a rare track to have a direct hit into this area, and for that reason, a lot of the impacts are expected to be severe. This is the track of the system, and this is again as of 6 o'clock or so, just 50 miles southwest of Sarasota at the time of this recording. And if we widen out the view, you'll notice how unusual this path really has been. That's the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Here's the western coast of Cuba. And notice the storm really just kind of zigging and zagging. There are a lot of turns on a hurricane's path. It's not always a straight line. And in this case, there really have been a lot of wobbles over the last several hours, which does make it kind of uneasy when you're tracking it on a closer view. You can see just like that or that. That can be the difference between an incredibly high storm surge or a little bit lower, just depending on where you are on the coastline. Again, that storm is zeroing in now on the Sarasota area, which is right about here. There's Port Charlotte, there's Fort Myers. They've already been observing some storm surge. Fort Myers Beach certainly reporting some elevated water into the town there on the streets. The eyewall center really has been weakened a little bit compared to where it was earlier, but it's still plenty strong. And there are really the worst winds inside of a hurricane are always found right there within the eye wall, as we call it, and that will be ashore by 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and then just go inland from there throughout the state of Florida, really across the central part of the state. I expect this to be the landfall position right there between Bradenton, Sarasota, and Venice. This is where the highest winds will be, and really up here, that's the mouth of Tampa Bay. You're going to see a lot of the water actually getting pushed around in a backwards fashion. At first, the winds are always going like this on the north side of the storm, so a lot of that water is going to back up and head towards St. Petersburg. Once the eye moves like that, though, you will get a little bit of the pushing on the other side of things. If the eye stays just south of Tampa, the storm surge will not be quite as bad as it could have been feared if the storm went a little bit to the north, because the wind direction is opposite. This is one of the cameras we're able to show you from the Palmetto area on the south side of the Tampa Bay region. There have been certainly some ups and downs. This is a pretty safe harbor, so that's where you would park your boats. This is likely to get a bit more intense as we go closer. Now, this is quite a different story altogether, isn't it? Sarasota already reported wind gusts close to 80 miles per hour. This is going to be a big problem, and again, likely to be near the storm center as this thing comes ashore in the next several hours. As of about 7 o'clock this evening, winds gusting between 65, 75, close to 80 miles per hour as that eye is still closing in on the region. Wind gusts elsewhere, even on the east coast, they're still pretty high, 40, 50, and 60 miles per hour too. A lot of problems when you talk about this hurricane. We're looking at tornadoes, and goodness, there have been so many different tornadoes throughout the day today. It was clear in the morning this is going to be a prolific tornado producer for the state of Florida, and especially areas pretty far away from the center. Remember, this thing is a Gulf storm. Most of the tornadoes have been happening over on the east coast, and these are not little ones that you often see with the tropical system. Instead, these ones are strong, and they have been damaging as well. There were a couple reports here in that Fort Myers area earlier, seeing some damage, of course, on the ground with some of those as well. But the busiest part of the state for this has really been on the East Coast, from Fort Pierce to Port St. Lucie, Vero Beach, all these areas. All those red dots represent individual tornado reports. A lot of these have been captured on DOT cameras, and a lot of damage has been seen also. It's a big risk for tornadoes, okay? Over the rest of the day and even into the overnight hours, these spots, especially in the shaded orange categories, really up and down the I-95 corridor, even into the central part of the state, they have the biggest risk of tornadoes. And again, much more than usual for a hurricane. It's common to get a couple. They've had about 130 tornado warnings from morning through afternoon and early evening across the state of Florida, and that's just so far. Where is it going? Well, as we said, it's really zeroing in on Sarasota and then moving inland from there. So by early tomorrow morning, the storm center will already be pushing closer to the eastern part of the state. Orlando gets a nasty blow with this storm system, to be sure, and really all the way over toward Cape Canaveral. The highest rainfall amounts are likely to be just on the north side of the system. It's a lot drier down here, but the winds, they're really going to be tightly packed more so toward the storm center. If we widen out the view, you'll notice it continues on that easterly path. It is not expected to make any sort of sharp turn after that. And despite the rumors, there are no indications of this thing coming toward the Carolinas or in Georgia. Safely guarded right now by high pressure. Why is the storm getting steered the way that it is? There are very clear weather reasons, and it all has to do with that big high pressure system up there. The high pressure basically acts like a big boulder in a stream. If you drop a big rock there, all the water is going to rush around it. It can't go through it. Well, it works the same way with weather. Low pressure systems are lighter and not as heavy. High pressure is that harder, heavier, cooler, dense air, and really they just need to go around. So that's a big roadblock for this storm. There's also the jet stream with the wind blowing off to the east, and that is where Milton will be going. So it truly is only a Florida hurricane in this time. Let's show you a futurecast. This is around about 11 o'clock to around midnight tonight. The storm will already be ashore at that time. And notice the worst of it is on the north side. It's pretty dry down here. The winds will be a little lower too, but the worst with the rain and the wind from the Tampa area to Spring Hill up to Orlando. That's around midnight. If we forward a little bit more, this is closer to about 4 a.m. or so. Things are improving in the Tampa area, Sarasota too. A lot of you won't have power at that time. Most of the state in this portion is going to lose power, but the storm center will be making progress. And then by about 7, 8, and 9 in the morning, the storm is gone. Milton will be offshore at that time. I want to show you just the winds. It can be a little easier to visualize when we do it this way. This will be around 9 to 10 o'clock on our Wednesday evening. Worst of the wind still along the west coast, but everybody throughout central Florida should expect some very, very windy weather. Lots of power outages happening during this time, as you would expect with a hurricane. And the worst of the weather for you is really overnight. So basically from sunset all the way to sunrise, it's going to be a long night across central Florida for sure. But once you get closer to 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, it's breezy, but the worst of the wind will be over. Just to kind of summarize, there are hurricane warnings, of course, for pretty much the whole central part of the state. The blue is a tropical storm warning to the north, to the south, but that middle portion from Fort Myers to Tampa, Daytona down to Melbourne, that is your problem with the hurricane warning. We talk about the flooding. That's mostly along the storm center as well. You have the highest risk of that, much lower down to the south. And for tomorrow, even in the morning hours, that'll be an issue for the East Coast before the storm does start to exit. So just to recap for you, Milton coming ashore as a strong Category 3 hurricane. It will be hitting landfall right around Sarasota by around 8 to 9 o'clock on this Wednesday evening. Everybody in that area just needs to hunker down. It'll be moving across the state very quickly. A cold front is actually helping to guide this offshore, and from there, conditions are expected to improve pretty quickly on Thursday. If you're watching this from up here in North Carolina in our News 2 viewing area, our weather is going to be pretty delightful and fall-like. That's all to do with that high pressure system that's blocking the hurricane to the south. Winds will be pretty calm around here. Conditions are sunny. We'll have morning lows in the 40s and afternoon highs in the 60s. So all things Milton are coming to an end by Thursday, but the cleanup, the aftermath, all of those things, unfortunately, will remain. It's going to be a big mess whenever you have a major hurricane coming ashore, in places, especially on the Gulf Coast. That's going to be a big problem. That's your update for now. We'll have more as we go throughout Hurricane Milton and that storm pushing into the Florida area.